All right. Good morning, everybody. I'm sure more individuals will be rolling in as we get started here. We are going to go ahead and get started. So we are recording this, and again, thank you everybody for the innovation here. I hope you're settled in, maybe in your daytime jammies. Rebecca and I were just chatting about how excited we were to actually get formally dressed today. So this working from home is a definite shift for all of us. So the way the Zoom meeting works is that Rebecca will be moderating for me, and you can see there is a little space for questions and answers. And so she is going to be our formal answerer today. And that being said, she will also wave at me as questions come up. And if there's questions that are specific to the lecture, then she'll cue me and read me the question, and then I'll be able to answer live. So if there's simple questions that aren't necessarily part of the discussion, feel free to send her those, and then she'll let me know if there's questions that are particularly pertinent. And so that might be integration questions, case questions. We'll be talking a lot about telehealth right now for good reason, because I would assume a lot of us are operating that way. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started.
Kate, can I ask just a quick question?
Of course.
Sorry. So we have the chat that's going. A lot of people are utilizing the chat. That is a slightly different function than the Q&A function.
Yes.
The two buttons. So if somebody is wanting to send in a question specifically for me to be able to answer and or to pass along to Dr. Truitt for today, please use the Q&A.
Should see a little box here.
Yeah. So at the very bottom of the screen is a chat, and then next to it's a Q&A. So we'll use that for the questions pertinent to the training today.
Okay. And maybe Carol, would one of you perhaps want to send a sample question so everybody can see what that looks like? And Rebecca can do an answer for everybody. Maybe. Okay. So if you're struggling with the Q&A, that's fine. Just we can also use the chat box.
Yeah.
There's a question. There we go.
Strong work.
Okay, what are the havening techniques?
There we go.
Do it. That's what we're here to talk about. Perfect question.
Thank you all. I will be working to answer the questions as quickly as possible, but I'll also be looking for themes in responding. So it may not be a response to that particular question, but I will be sending responses as well.
Perfect. All right. So we are here today to talk about the havening techniques, and this is a fairly new treatment modality. It's not a traditional psychotherapy method such as cognitive behavioral therapy or brain spotting, EMDR. It's in its own way a unique experience because it's a bolt-on tool that can enhance any type of work that you do. So if we use it here with internal family systems, we use it here with cognitive behavioral therapy, we use it with psychosensory techniques, somatic experiencing, and it creates a different foundation and opportunity to help the fear brain calm down and get out of the way. I do this fear brain back here because our little fear brain's kind of hanging out in the back of our brain. It's really primal. We'll talk a lot about that today, to get this part of the brain out of the way so that our thinking brain is able to come online and function in a healthier and more empowered way. Now, I like to start a lecture with a little bit of my story, and I'm also going to be integrating a lot of information about health anxiety. We are all in a worldwide experience right now, and obviously I don't even need to go more in depth in saying that, of what that experience is. And havening has been profoundly, profoundly helpful in my own team's regulation of their nervous systems and our patients' regulation of their nervous systems. We have an entire YouTube channel, Dr. Kate Truitt, of different kind of quick conversations, interviews, self-care techniques to help regulate the system, because our brains are right now in a state of vigilance and awareness, more so than they've ever been before. And so one of my primary goals of this talk today is to teach you how to do what's called CPR for the amygdala for yourselves. You should have gotten the handout prior to us starting today. And to how to integrate CPR for the amygdala into your own self-care experience and also into your family's lives. Again, it's not psychotherapy, it's a technique. And so this is a really quick intervention to help the brain and body calm down in these really interesting and unique times. So my story is that I had PTSD. I'm a neuroscientist and a clinical psychologist. I started out in rat labs back in 1999 studying what's called conditioned taste aversion, which is a fear paradigm. It's a learning paradigm that examines how does a stressful or fearful experience change the executive functioning of our thinking brain and consequent choices that we're able to make in our environment. And rats' little brains are kind of mini replicas of our brain. And so I've been studying the amygdala in depth since around 1999 for a very, very long time. And in 2009, I had a traumatic experience where a week before my wedding, my fiance unexpectedly passed away. And we had been together since I was 18 years old. So the entire time I was evolving into what I thought was a trauma expert space, he was my partner in that journey and in my life. And I was the one who found him, and I could not resurrect, I couldn't save him. And so the consequences of that night evolved into a 5-year, very personal experience with trauma and a very humbling experience living with PTSD and having to rearrange my entire life to accommodate the fact that my brain was now completely hijacked and out of my own control in many situations that historically would have been a normal situation. So I stopped treating patients. I stopped going to plays or concerts because as my PTSD generalized, which trauma does, I started being unable to be in large crowds and my entire world flipped upside down. So luckily, I also have an MBA in healthcare administration, and so I was able to start doing some consultation work, and that it was in the course of that work that I found havening. But that 5-year journey for me opened up a very different world in regards to being a neuroscientist. Because in that 5-year period, I realized that everything I thought I knew about trauma and how the brain works doesn't matter when you actually have trauma. Because the thinking brain can know, oh, I'm triggered. The thinking brain can step back and say, okay, for me, if I had a specific event where I was at a play and unexpectedly there was a body on the floor of the play theater and there's a white sheet on the body. And I had a full-blown flashback panic attack. And, my thinking brain was going, Kate, breathe, calm down, you're fine. But my friend, the amygdala back here, didn't give a whit about the fact that my thinking brain knew what was happening. And that, I think, is where the havening techniques becomes really powerful, because it's in those moments where our thinking brain may know better, but our powerful emotional survival brain is overwhelming us, that havening gives us space to create incredible change. And I think right now we could all use a little bit of that space. So I found havening on a bit of a wing and a prayer in 2014, or I would say havening found me when I was in a consultation experience in Jacksonville, Florida, and a licensed clinical social worker, Bill Souls, who's amazing, introduced me to this idea that you can rub your arms and your face, although right now we're not really doing a lot of face havening for good reason. And I did just wash my hands. Or you can, rub your hands together and sing some songs and help your brain calm down and even depotentiate traumatically encoded experiences. And of course, I thought he was completely bonkers, because what? That's just a really strange thing to start to think about. If I do this, then I'm going to heal trauma. But then again, I've trained in EMDR since 2004. And if any of you are EMDR practitioners and you remember the original days of doing this is, and then that heals trauma. As Bessel van der Kolk would say, you're going to wiggle your fingers in front of somebody's face and the trauma is going to go away. Well, you know, our brains work in mysterious ways. And when I heard about havening, I started researching the techniques in depth and chose to fly out to a training in New York, largely because my then partner, who's now my husband, I never thought I'd be able to get married, had airplane miles and a hotel room because he had to be there for a conference. And so I just kind of hitched a ride with him, and and this sounds crazy, but within 15 minutes in that first breakout group, my traumatically encoded experience, so the intractable memory of walking into the bedroom and finding my late fiance, that memory released and my trauma symptoms dissipated. And it was phenomenal. Now I want to caveat that with, I had already spent, you know, 40, 50, $60,000 on trauma therapy over the previous 5 years. So I'd done EMDR, I'd done cognitive processing therapy, I'd done TRIM, I'd basically done everything I'd been trained in, and worked with amazing people. So the experience had softened in my brain, but all of those modalities targeted a different part of the brain from the amygdala. And havening is very unique because it targets the amygdala specifically. So let's dive into the full-on lecture here. And what I'd like to do first, because I think we could all use a little bit of, there we go. A little bit of autonomic nervous system regulation. I'd like to start with a simple guided meditation here. And this is, I really want to highlight that we have something called neuroplasticity, and our brain is so able to set shift. And I know everybody in this space who's joining us knows that. And I know you know that because you wouldn't be in this field otherwise. If the brain wasn't possible of changing, we wouldn't be able to do the amazing work that we do. So neuroplasticity gives us the power to intentionally design our cognitive frame. This is my 4-year-old thoroughbred who I rescued off the track a couple years ago. And this experience happened after one of the young riders. I train with performance horseback riders, and one of the young girls had a pretty nasty fall. And we were back at the tack room doing some havening to help her fear brain calm down so she could get back into the arena and jump the course again. And as we looked up, there was the horse looking over his stall and smiling down at her. And we have another young girl, she's about 5 years old, who helps out a lot at the barns, one of the trainer's daughters. And she pointed up at the horse. She goes, "Hey, Sierra, look, the horse has got your back." And it was just such a magical moment to watch everybody just start grinning and shift. And so it really highlighted for me that lightness is possible in every moment. And in the world we're living in right now, there is no truer reminder that we're all in need of, because there is lightness around us, even when things feel really dark. So I'd like to invite everybody to take a moment, just ground your feet on the floor. Notice if you're sitting in a chair or a stool, or maybe you have a standing desk, whatever's holding you up. Notice the supportive structure of your body. And let's take a gentle breath in. And as you inhale, count to 5. And then when you're ready, a slow, gentle exhale out to 6. And if you're already familiar with the havening touch, go ahead and start applying to the touch to your arms and your hands. And if not, go ahead and just be present with your mind and your body and allow your eyes to gently drift close. We're going to continue to take slow, easy, gentle breaths. And allow your mind to start drifting back across this week, this morning, yesterday. And I'd like for you to invite in a smile. Perhaps it's the smile of a loved one as you walked into a room. Maybe it's a smile from one of those four-legged furry creatures. Perhaps out on a walk, passing a neighbor. And once you've found your smile, invite that smile to become the center of your attention. Bringing it forward, inviting it to be saturated front and center. And notice if you want to smile back. Notice if your physiology, your mind, or your body shifts in the presence of that smile. Notice if that smile has a color or a warmth, an energy. Inviting in another gentle breath. Notice if your breath feels easier or if it's shifted. I'd like to invite you to ask that smile to stay with you throughout this day. Say, hi, smile. Will you be my partner today as we navigate these experiences? Notice if that smile lives somewhere in your mind or your body. And invite it to anchor into that space. Notice if your smile has a name. My smiles generally like to be called Bob. I don't know why. And so as my days shift and change, I'll check in with my smile and say, hey, Bob, how's it going? Which will invite my smile energy back to the forefront. Our brain likes to feel good, likes to take care of us. And when you're ready, with another gentle breath in, invite that smile to perhaps sit next to you as we move forward with this conversation this morning. And to be there ready to come forward and spend some time with you again when you invite it to. Thank your smile for its presence. And let's come back into this space. And I'd like to invite everybody, if you noticed a shift in that exercise, perhaps put a heart in, or smiley face or something in the chat box. Just to connect. I think right now so much of everything we're doing is about finding connection. And seeing those smiles definitely brings a smile to my face. Our brain loves to help us feel good, and one of the things that happens as we navigate our lives is sometimes our brain starts to get confused about what feeling good looks like or feels like, because the survival part of our brain starts to get in the way. And so havening creates space again for our smile brain to come back. I just realized I'm blocking a little bit of the slide here, so I'm going to shift this over so that I'm not. Move this up. Oh, okay. So there we go. Got it. So We all have our specific modalities that we've been trained in and we've invested a lot of time and energy in. And psychotherapy over the course of our field has largely been about the use of language to change our moods, to change sensations, thinking patterns, and behaviors. And we know that psychotherapy is effective. We kind of joke in team meetings periodically about how the painful dichotomy of how people being in pain is our job security. And the fact that we have the ability to help the brain change and heal through sitting in presence and space with everybody, through rapport and engagement, is such a powerful gift that we've all been trained in, and as humans who've gone into this field tend to lean into a natural affinity for. Now, for individuals who are struggling a little bit more when the thinking brain is in a space of nuance difficulty with those shifts and change in mood, then we've leaned into psychopharmacology to help the brain become more permissive for change. And psychopharmacology, as we're all aware, is the idea of antidepressants, benzodiazepines, any sort of psychotropics that our patients might work with in order to create this change that they need. And it's a really powerful part of the treatment space to have the psychotropics. The way I tend to look at medication is if somebody's drowning, we can't, that's that old adage of if somebody's drowning, the worst thing you can do is go out there as a human and grab them and pull them, because their survival brain will actually make their body wrap around us, and we'll go down with them. But what we'll do instead, and what you're trained to do as a lifeguard, actually float them a buoy, and then they can grab the buoy, and then you can help them get to safety once they're on the buoy, once they're on the raft or whatever it might be. And that's how I view medication, and it's a really powerful adjunct. Psychosensory therapy is the newest, triad or pillar here. So psychosensory therapy created a whole new opportunity of working directly with neurology and biology in the treatment space. So rather than going through the outside world with language and relationship, we're now able to work with how the brain is making sense of the sensory experiences in the world around us. The most common psychosensory therapy and the longest in our field, obviously, is EMDR. But psychosensory therapy also dates back thousands of years to acupuncture, acupressure, and meridian work. All of that actually is psychosensory work, because what we're doing is changing how the brain and the body are making sense of the world around us. And havening would be qualified as this here, a psychosensory therapy, because it's utilizing our core senses, a outside generation of touch, to create an internal shift in our brain and our body. Like I mentioned when we first started the conversation, havening is specifically focusing on these more primal areas of brain functioning. We're looking at the mammalian and the reptilian brain when we're doing havening work, specifically this little experience here, the amygdala. Our thinking brain, our traditional psychotherapy, is really trying to work with our goofy guy up here and say, okay, goofy guy, you need to overpower the dog and the lizard and get them to listen. Now, I saw a wonderful meme yesterday posted by a colleague that said, it's interesting looking at humans right now. They're really struggling to sit and stay. We can train a dog, but you can't train a human. And I thought that was such a great and appropriate meme for this conversation we're having, because we're in this counterintuitive state right now, and our clients and our patients are in this counterintuitive state of being told you have to stay home for your safety, which means you're having to disconnect from the people you love and care about. I think the word social distancing is not a preferable choice, because in a fear state, our brain is going, I want to connect and be with people. We're attachment based. And so our thinking brain and our mammalian brain are having a little bit of a butting heads conversation of our thinking brain saying, I know I need to stay home. And our pack animal brain back here that's attachment based saying, where is my pack? I need my people to be safe. There's a discernible threat and I need to huddle up to be okay. And so the amygdala creates the space for our mammalian brain, or havening creates the space for mammalian brain and our lizard brain to feel safe, regardless of needing to be in connection with somebody else, because in effect, we're putting our system into the connection space that we get in relationship with others. And I'll unpack that more in just a minute. So again, our goal here with havening is to look at the mammalian and reptilian brain. If you see where my little arrow is here, this part of our brain is called the anterior cingulate gyrus. And this is when we look at the fMRI studies of EMDR pre-post, this is the part of the brain that receives the greatest shifts in doing EMDR work. This part of our brain is focused on helping our dog and our lizard brains figure out what is important to me in terms of my survival and who am I in the world. So if we reflect back to graduate school and those ideas of internal locus of control and external locus of control, the idea, external locus of control is I'm defined by the world around me. Internal locus of control is I define myself and I have agency on the world around me, which is the core concept of why we do psychotherapy, is to get people to have internal locus of control. This is specifically the job of that part of the brain. And what we're looking at with havening actually is getting again back into this more primal part of the brain. So we're getting into an earlier sequence in the information processing paradigm that our system experiences. And again, if you have questions, feel free to pop them open and pop them over. So, and if I'm going too fast, or if you just say, hey, can you break that down a little bit more, that's fine too. You know, help me help you. I'm here for everybody on this chat today. And Rebecca, if you have a question that comes up, you're great at throwing questions at me, so please highlight as well. So if we, again, going back to these psychosensory tools and EMDR, so back in 1988, Francine Shapiro had that famous walk where she recognized that drifting her eyes from one side to the other can actually fundamentally shift what's happening in her emotional brain. And Bessel van der Kolk has really led the charge as the world's foremost traumatologist, which is a title that they made up for him, which is pretty cool, in helping our field at wide recognize that trauma really has nothing to do with cognition. It has to do with our body being reset to interpret the world as a dangerous place. And it's not something we can talk ourselves or think ourselves out of. And so when I reflect on my story as a trauma expert, as a neuroscientist, living in a world of PTSD, it was so annoying because I couldn't think myself out of the panic. And when I would have a panic attack or a flashback, it would be really embarrassing and mortifying. And, you know, I knew exactly what my brain was doing. And I remember I would compulsively try to explain to people in the aftermath of a panic attack what had happened, and be like, well, you have to understand, my brain did this thing and my amygdala is doing that and blah, 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 blah. And then they'd look at me and be like, why? And what I realized is I felt shame and embarrassment because of having a panic attack in front of somebody, or, you know, at a play where I'm literally stampeding over people to get out of the theater. And that is a part of the trauma brain as well, as it's not just these acute experiences of the brain being reset and saying, okay, I've had a traumatic moment. The traumatic experience, our little fear-based friend here, will create actual volumetric changes in how all of the rest of these parts of our brain develop and are therefore able to function. So when Amy has encoded experiences, Amy, our amygdala, that are traumatic, our anterior cingulate gyrus actually has less volume, which makes it harder for agency to be developed because the world in the external world out here is more fear-based. And so external locus of control is mandated because we're fear-based. Now, looking at this quote here, our body being reset to interpret the world as a dangerous place, and looking at where we're living right now with coronavirus, you know, in a way, the world actually is, to some respect, a dangerous place. This is the first time our species has ever been a danger to itself in this way, simply through breath. And that's really important for us to notice and pay attention to. And that's why I honestly am so grateful that this lecture was already on the books, because if breathing is dangerous to our loved ones, imagine the heyday that our little amygdala can begin to have on our ability to successfully navigate in the world right now, right? So I'm sure some of you have had experiences, and I certainly have, where patients are developing what's called fear anxiety or health anxiety, which is this idea that a cough is indicative of a fear spiral into, I have coronavirus and I'm infected, I need to get to urgent care, ER, because of a coughing fit, which is the exact same thing that happens for somebody who has panic attacks and goes up a set of stairs, has difficulty catching their breath, and their brain says, oh, we're going to have a panic attack, even though there's a reasonable stimulus for why they're having difficulty catching their breath. So having those conversations with our patients right now is so important, because our brain will start to hijack us into fear after a very traditional stimulus of, oh, it's allergy season. You know, of course, coronavirus had to happen in spring as opposed to fall, where we wouldn't be having allergies. So recognizing the difference between actual physical symptoms and then being able to create that space for our brain and for our patients' brains or our loved ones' brains is going to be even more important now than ever before. So the foundation of havening is that we can heal our mind, or really our amygdala, through electrochemical impulses. And that's because our system is innately designed to want to return to a homeostatic or resilient state. Now, that hadn't been recognized in this way until, or had a formal scientific structure put around it until the Rudins started researching havening back in 2001. So a little background on havening. Ron and Steve Rudin, who are these amazing twin brothers, they're in their mid-70s now, both went to Harvard at the age of 16, and one's a dentist, one's a PhD in neurochemistry, and then went on to get his MD. And Steve's the dentist. He's the world's foremost expert in dental phobias. They were approached by a colleague who queried them about why EMDR and tapping work. And they're just kind of innately curious humans. And they started investigating the underlying physiology and neurology of EMDR and tapping. And I've sat on many dissertations, doctoral projects looking at EMDR. And one of the things that has been missing is the underlying research as to why does it work. We know it works. We know what happens after it works, but going into the deep experience of what's happening in the moment hasn't yet existed. And that's something that we're actually researching. I mean, we're on a social altruistic pause right now during the coronavirus. That's our term for social distancing. I think I mentioned that. But we're starting to do brain mapping while doing havening. Rebecca's our neurofeedback expert in our group. And so that we can start to really look at the deeper underlying electrochemical process of havening. And we're also partnered with Huntington Hospital, again, paused, to start doing fMRIs pre-post, and as well as during havening, to get a sense of really studying the underlying shifts. But what the Rudins did is they dove into the literature and spent 13 years just defining and discerning what is actually happening down to the synaptic level for EMDR and for tapping. And in the course of that deep dive, they started to come up with a streamlined process for EMDR and tapping, and looking at the touches and the experiences of these touches to create functional change. And if you'd like to learn a lot more about this in depth, this is Ronald Rudin's book that he published several years ago that is very science heavy. It's a good read. I have two books that'll be coming out at the end of this year, and one's a little more accessible clinical book on a deep dive into havening. So keep an eye out for that. But we're not going to go into the deep electrochemical experiences here. If you want to come to the online training, you'll get to have more information about that. But the core process, what the Rudins figured out, is a way to work directly with the amygdala to not only depotentiate a fear, an intractable memory, or an encoded traumatic experience, such as what I described with my own experience of finding my fiance, but to also subsequently start to change and heal the networks that have developed out of the traumatically encoded experience. Like I described, the shame and the embarrassment after having a very public panic attack. And these neural networks that develop out of the amygdala are all coping based. They're meant to mitigate the likelihood of us being removed from our tribe and to help us continue to maintain a sense of self and agency. But often, as we know, those types of experiences are less than preferable and lead us to, use alcohol, use food, over exercise, whatever it might be, instead of sponsoring us in living our best and most empowered life. So in a nutshell, what does havening do? It depotentiates the traumatically encoded memories. And that memory doesn't have to be, as one of our associates, Dr. Megan Mansfield, would say, a experience that would be on an episode of the Special Victims Unit TV show, right? It wouldn't be on SVU. A traumatically encoded experience, as we know, can be one of those small t experiences, such as being bullied as a child and being left at school for a child that, being forgotten by the parents. It doesn't have to be what we're going through right now necessarily as a huge worldwide traumatic experience. It's only what creates a sense of once felt sense of safety in the world around us. And in addition to delinking those, so if we have a 5-year-old or a client that I was working with yesterday, who's as a child was bullied, several times, but has one memory that of specifically being bullied and being laughed at on the playground and being so upset and fraught at the age of 5 that they wet their pants. And then everybody's pointing and laughing at him for having wet his pants, and he's crying, and that began to generate into a lifelong experience of pretty severe social anxiety. And so as we were reprocessing that work, we were targeting that early 5-year-old memory, but we were also able to navigate the sense of self that developed from the age of 5, because the brain changes a lot as we grow up, and target those specific neural networks such as I'm a loser, I'm unlovable, I'm worthless, I'm a joke, which are neural pathways that were tied into a sense of self. Now, if you've got a memory like that, where you've been laughed at, where you've been shamed, thinking of yourself as a loser or a failure is actually protective, because it means you won't put yourself out in the world and risk, once again, being shamed or laughed at. But those neural networks were getting in the way as he's looking to become more expansive in his world. He wants to start dating, and feeling like a failure and a loser is not going to support him moving into the dating world, obviously. So it's not only about, havening doesn't just help us delink the initially encoded experience, it also empowers us to target those neural networks that have developed out of that experience, the free way our brain developed to keep us safe. But havening also empowers us to return the body to homeostasis through a reduction of allostatic load. So allostatic load is the amount of stress and tension that we're carrying at any given time. And right now we're all carrying a lot of stress and tension simply by living in an environment where, like we were talking about, breath can be scary. In some states, if you intentionally cough on somebody, that is actually now a criminal act. And people are doing that, which is, I just kind of pull my hair out and go, humans, come on, why? And so an act of aggression like that, but an unintentional cough, if anybody's had that experience, or at the grocery store checking out and somebody goes, ah, or even just me coughing now, even though we're on a screen, your brain might send up an alert because the amygdala is tuning into a cough now as a threat stimulus. So living in this environment, we want to use havening to help bring ourselves back into the homeostatic emotional state or nervous system regulation state. And the more we do that, the more we're widening our window of tolerance. Pardon me. Window of tolerance being Pat Ogden's concept, or Rick Henson talks a lot about the green brain. And Rebecca, do you mind popping into the chat box Rick Hanson and his books Resiliency or Resilience? And he has a wonderful podcast that I highly recommend as well. He's the world's foremost expert on resilience. And so that's a great transition into the next thing that havening does, which is we can boost resilience and personal empowerment. We have the ability to do what we did this morning with the smile exercise. And let's just take a moment and check back in on your smile. Like, hey, Bob, how's it going? And see what happens. See, I just felt my brain shift and feel a little lighter. And that was a little bit of a cheat for me because it's really hard talking at myself. I'm used to having a room of people and interacting with people. And so that was like a neuroplastic moment for my brain to go, oh yeah, I'm looking over, we have 45 attendees. That's great. Hi, everybody. And I'm greeting Bob and bringing my energy back up. So our brain loves to feel really good. And when we're intentional about laying down neural networks, then our brain can synapse into those more frequently. But if we're in a state of cortisol stress, then we want to help our brain calm down first. And then the havening touch creates greater permissiveness to, because of the electrochemical cascade, which I will describe in just a minute, that happens to enhance resiliency and build in personal empowerment intentionally. And Rebecca, was that a hand for me? No? Okay. We have it. We put a protocol in place that she can wave me down if there's a question for me to address. And finally, havening protects against vicarious traumatization. Now, we are all givers. We are caretakers. And vicarious trauma is that idea of secondary trauma. We're empaths. We are by design putting ourselves, by choice, by design and choice, putting ourselves into other people's pain stories. We're walking through their wounds with them. And our brain really struggles to differentiate our trauma from somebody else's trauma. In fact, trauma can be encoded first person, meaning it's happening directly to us. Second person, meaning we're watching it happen to somebody else. Or third person, which is we're hearing about somebody else's trauma. So when we're looking at vicarious trauma, we're all living within that space at all three levels sometimes with people. And I think more so right now, given this shift to telehealth, where we're at least used to being able to sit in a room with somebody and hold our nervous system as a tool for regulation while people are in their pain. And so the havening touch is a new opportunity to help mitigate that, because we can self-haven while we're working with people. When we're back in a room with somebody working one-on-one, then we can do something called facilitated havening. And when we're experiencing the havening touch, even if I sat here and self-havened through this entire lecture, which I'm not going to do because my brain will slow down and I'll lose my train of thought. One of the things havening does is it calms our brain down and puts us into a delta wave state. If I kept doing this, your mirror neurons are going to start to sync with the motion that I'm doing, and your brain will start to go into a delta wave state simply by me doing this. So what havening does as a trauma reprocessing tool is puts a protective bubble wrap around our own brains. And that's such an incredible gift, because in pre-havening, doing a ton of really in-depth and intense trauma work and also research and hearing a lot of people's wounds, I would carry that home. And I know you guys do too, you guys and gals, humans do too, because our brain is designed to mirror what's in the room around us or in the space around us. So this gives us bubble wrap. And the CPR for the amygdala that I'll be teaching today is also a hack for if you get off of a call or a video chat session or an in-person session with somebody, or even reading the news right now. You can do some CPR for your amygdala to protect against vicarious traumatization. And it's super fast and quick, 7 to 10 minutes, get your brain calmed down. And the more you practice havening, the more your brain will develop a neural memory for it, and the faster you can access it. And so our clinicians here on our team and the clinicians that I've trained will plan to do 2 minutes in between each session just to reset their system so that they're cleaned out, so to speak, to be fresh for the next client who's walking in the door. So it's a really cool brain hack in terms of supporting ourselves and being able to do our best work. So ultimately, our goal is to what I like to call Phoenix up, where the Phoenix is the firebird of mythical times, the mythical beast of it flies into the fire intentionally. It chooses to turn to ash so that it can arise stronger and more powerful each time, wiser. Because trauma is inevitable. And again, what we're experiencing right now really highlights how out of control the world can become so quickly. On March 4th, I pulled all team members who were not in session into my office, and we powwowed when the state of emergency here in LA County was announced, and said, I want to get your thoughts, but I think we need to go to telehealth as soon as possible. And the powwow conversation resulted in us starting telehealth the very next day. So within one press conference from our mayor, all of our patients started getting calls of, we're transitioning to telehealth for your safety and so that we can continue to be of service. That's how fast our world can turn upside down. And so it's important for us and for our patients to have the opportunity to regulate themselves in times of extreme distress. In a very different way, Viktor Frankl and the individuals who were put in internment camps in World War II experienced this. And if you haven't read Man's Search for Meaning, it's an incredible book, and I highly, highly recommend it. If you would pop that into the search box as well, Rebecca. And I know Rebecca's rereading it right now. You got a question? Yeah.
I do. It's a little bit off topic, but I think a lot of people are asking if the slides will be presented to the attendees.
Yeah. Some of the slides are copyright, so I cannot provide those, unfortunately. But if there are certain slides that people would like, we can gather those and send those, the ones that I can send out. Some of the slides are owned by Havening headquarters. So we will do our best to provide those. So if there's a slide that somebody wants, let us know. And even just as we're on that slide, perhaps just say this one in the chat box, and Rebecca can make a note. All right, or if that's too much, perhaps Carol, maybe you can do that for us, since I know Rebecca's also fielding questions. Just make a note to stress, and then stress into empowerment, then we can take that. So when we look at Calvin and Hobbes, this is really my goal for every patient that I work with, and my goal for every person that I have that I'm lucky enough to sit with and teach havening to, including all of you, is to say, okay, we're going to fall down, and let's make sure that our brain is able to phoenix through the fall and come up wiser and go, ta-da, okay, that happened, and here's all of the silver linings, and to take those experiences and then turn them into opportunities to organically and immediately find the silver lining. And that is possible, to train our brain to move into that sustainable state of the phoenix, knowing that no matter what's happening around us, there is a silver lining to it. So I'd like to invite everybody to watch this lovely video. But before I push start, just take a moment and check in with your mind and body and notice where you are right now. Just noticing the ambient energy of your presence in this moment. And I'm going to go ahead and push play and notice what happens as you watch this video. Quickly. Uh, Again, did anybody notice a shift? This is an old video. This is recorded back in the early 90s. This is pre-havening. And if you have children, um, you might have done this very thing. The number of times I've sat on a plane and watched a mom soothe their child, I've seen my sister do this, and God bless my sister. She's her, but it was so amazing the first time I watched her with her daughter, being in this state of just natural soothing. My sister's very much not a soothing type of person, and how organically she and her daughter just connected, and she started doing this not knowing anything about havening. So we are hardwired to do these different types of touches. My husband's from India, and when I first introduced him to havening, he showed me a massage experience that his grandmom would do when he was little, where she would circle his eyes like that and sing him lullabies and hymns. And he's like, oh, she was havening. I'm like, no, she was humaning. And the Rudins put a scientific protocol around how to teach us to do that to help people. So we're hardwired to do these experiences. And that little space there, if you notice that shift, those are your mirror neurons. That's your brain going, oh, I know that feeling, and registering and linking that feeling inside you and connecting to it. And that's a lot of what havening utilizes in its work. So these are hardwired touches. We would greet somebody by shaking their hand, or somebody's having a hard time, we put our hand on their shoulder and rub our hand on the arm. Well, that's the havening touch. We have nice, warm, fuzzy hugs. Now, in this time of social altruism, where we're being in a state of keeping distance for safety, havening gives us a process to give ourselves what's missing in these moments when we can't go out and connect with the world around us. So we can apply our own hugs and generate the same electrochemical experience that we would get if we were able to go give somebody a big hug. Now, Rebecca and I are both in the office today, and we're definitely doing our social altruism, keeping our space from one another. But it was my first gut instinct to want to run up and give her a big hug because I miss her. And I can even feel myself choking up a little bit.
You were my smile.
Oh, you're mine. And so what I noticed, and I don't know if Rebecca, if you noticed that you did this too, we were both kind of like, hey, and then we both went like this. And so we were able to give ourselves immediately the hug that we would have been giving to each other if that was safe. And we've been quarantining for almost a month now, aside from being with our mutual partners. But so most likely we're fine. We could hug, but still, it was so interesting to just observe biologically and innately how we went, okay, hi, to be in that presence, and then give ourselves that hug. So the self-havening touch is so powerful, even more so right now because of that opportunity to give ourselves what we would otherwise be doing in connection with the people that we love and care about. Now, how do we know this works? How do we know that rubbing our hands together, like I said, the first time Bill told me about it, I thought he was totally bonkers. How come, and what does these touches do? So back in the first research study looking at this was Harper in 2011, and we can send this article over if you like, where he basically put a cap on, if you've ever seen a QEEG, and we have all these tools here, which is really cool. We have a brain cave as opposed to a man cave in our office. And he started measuring what are these different things that, meridian work, acupressure, looking at the idea of EMDR and tapping, what's actually happening in the brain to create the shifts that we know people experience from doing this type of work. And the brain mapping that he did highlighted that different areas shifted the system into a stronger delta wave state. And I'll break that down in just a minute what that means. But it was these 4 areas that generated the highest presence of delta waves. And you can see the lateral eye movements also generated a delta wave state. So he also identified one of the underlying mechanisms of action of EMDR. But looking at the shoulders and the arms and the cheek and the forehead, you'll notice that these numbers here, 55 to 90, 5 to 38, those are exponential increases from a baseline state. So if we look at, this isn't what happens in the brain, but just for explanation, if we have 0 delta waves presence in our brain right now, and I start doing face havening, within a minute or two, my brain's going to move into a state of having 55 to 90 times, not percent, 90 times more delta wave presence. So we were at 0, we're now at 90. And that creates the opposite state of what happens in a traumatic encoding. So let's just talk brains for a moment here. When we're in a state of excitement or extreme anxiety, our brain goes into a gamma wave state. And actually, when it's extreme, it's a hyper gamma wave state. So it's faster than this. And you can see this looks like pretty woo. So one of my favorite questions here is to just take a moment, and this works better in a group because people can kind of check in with one another. But ask yourself, do you love or hate roller coasters? And for most people, it is pretty binary. Some people are neutral, but most people, it is binary. They love them or they hate them. And the idea of being on a roller coaster, love or hate, the brain electrochemically is in the exact same state. If you love it or if you hate it, it's going to look like this gamma wave state here. And the reason that it feels different is because of the framework that we put on the experience. And I apologize, they're picking up our trash outside, so you might have a little extra noise right now. So we're technically, as a rule and as a species, not supposed to strap ourselves into metal boxes and plummet to the earth. We're not supposed to do that. That's a really bad idea in terms of our evolution. And our brain knows that. But for some of us, we're able to bring on the thinking brain's awareness of, well, enough engineers have worked on this roller coaster to create a rational semblance of safety that we can strap ourselves into this box and plummet to the earth at a very rapid speed. For others, our brain goes, I don't care how many engineers worked on this. That's a terrible idea. I'm not doing it. Now, those two different frameworks feel very different in terms of their presence in our neurology, but electrochemically, they look like this. So fear and excitement mirror each other electrochemically. Now, if we jump all the way down to this delta wave state, you can see how different this wave is. Oh, sorry about that, guys. We're not quite there yet. From the gamma wave state. Now, for an experience to be encoded as traumatic, our brain has to actually go to over 100 hertz. Our brain's going, this is so important that its frequency amps up even more. And Amy back here, our friend, the amygdala, goes, I'm remembering this forever because this was literally threatening to my life. And we survived, but I'm remembering it forever. And these are those small t and big T moments. And again, small t can be the threat of getting kicked out of our tribe. So any of the bullying, anything where we've been forgotten or left out by our caregivers, those can be those experiences where our brain goes, this was so bad that I'm remembering it forever. Now, because havening exponentially creates this delta wave state, we click back here for a moment, 55 to 90 times our resting delta wave state, it has the ability to shift us out of the encoding experience that our brain goes in. With EMDR, you can see the vibrating pads on hands, the lateral eye movements. The delta wave state generated by EMDR isn't strong enough to combat that hyper gamma wave state. We need to have the exponential delta wave presence. And so EMDR still works, but it's targeting, again, the mohawk, that anterior cingulate gyrus, the filtering part of the brain, as opposed to directly interacting with the amygdala or the fear-based brain. And so that's the underlying mechanism of action of havening. And God bless our simple little system for saying, I like to be pet. Let's give a hug. I like to have a hug. You know, I've got a tension headache. Okay, let's just rub that out. And one of the reasons that havening does this impact or creates this opportunity is because of something called these C-tactile fibers. So C-tactile fibers are what are slow nerve fibers, and they directly interact with, you can see here, our insular cortex. So the insular cortex is the part of our brain that says, brain, let's have a conversation with our body. And in trauma, the insula is one of the core brain areas to go offline. If you come to the 2-day training, we dive really deep into all of the different brain areas, and even providing specific protocols to target all the brain areas that have been impacted because trauma's been encoded. And the insula is one of the primary ones that we do a lot of work with. This is what somatic experiencing and TRIM are really, and CRIM as well, are really focusing in on, is this insula area of the brain. It's saying, hi, brain, we need to have a conversation with the body. But going back to Bessel's quote, if the body feels unsafe in the world, then the brain's going to have to mitigate that by turning down the volume on different structures in our brain so that our brain can continue to function. So if the brain constantly feels unsafe and our insula is functioning at a normal homeostatic state, we're going to constantly be in a state of fight, flight, or freeze. And so our brain is so wily and so smart that it actually turns down the volume on the insula, and that results in decreased volume in our insula in people who have traumatized brains. So they don't have the ability to connect or speak to their body. That's dissociation in a nutshell. And so what these slow nerve fibers are doing are inviting the insula to the conversation. But because this touch creates that specific electrochemical state, it's not alarming or jarring when the insula starts to come back online. And so we're able, I like to call it putting a warm fuzzy hug around the amygdala, and the body's transmitted into a electrochemical sense of safety to do the trauma reprocessing work. Now, this is specifically pertinent right now because with havening, we can do really incredibly deep trauma reprocessing while utilizing video chat. And we can do it safely because we can put the body into a state of safety through the havening touch. And if there is an abreaction, we have CPR for the amygdala, which cuts the abreaction off. It turns off the neural network that's driving the trauma reaction very, very, very quickly. And our patients are doing it for themselves. They're the ones who are actually calming their brains and their bodies. And they're the ones who are actually taking care of their amygdala and helping it heal while we provide the structured guidance. So it's again, this is one of those things where I go, I don't know how the Rudins knew that eventually in 2020 we're going to need this, but thank God they figured this stuff out for us. So applying these touches activates these C-tactile fibers, which then gives us into a state of electrochemical safety. Now, we also have fast fibers. And so one of the things that EMDR is doing, if we look at the butterfly taps or the buzzies, those are jarring. And so that's going to the somatosensory cortex, which still creates that delta wave state like we talked about, but in a different way. And it's helping the brain transmit the data across the prefrontal cortex and the more primal thinking brain. I'm not going to go too much more in depth than that because we're not talking about EMDR here. I studied it extensively, but so it's a different mechanism of action, which is why we have a different outcome. Both are really powerful modalities, and to use the two in conjunction is really, really, really cool and exciting if you are trained in EMDR or brain spotting. And we have a lot of SC practitioners who use havening with their somatic experiencing work. And it's really deeply profound to see what happens, because they're bringing insula and insula into relationship with both modalities. So the Havening touch itself is very simple. Simply the arms coming down, you can see, and I'm stopping at the elbows. And while this image does go up and down, my recommendation for speed modulation is to simply go down the arms, because in times of distress, it can be really easy to start to do this. And even just if you notice, as you're watching me do this, how does that feel to watch? It doesn't feel good to me to even be doing it. It's fast and it's a little jarring to my system. So that activates the other C tactile fibers. What we're looking for is the slow, easy, gentle touch. And then it's the hand havening. And then across the brow and under the cheekbones. So, and when I'm teaching this to somebody for the first time, which would be right now, I will teach a process that goes in sequence. I'm going to actually turn my screen down so you can see a little better here. We go around the brow, down the arms, and to the hands. Around the brow, down the arms, into the hands. Because it's hard to do this fast, whereas you can quickly go like that. Now, right now, one of the things we're reminding everybody is every time you're washing your hands, you're hand havening. And so if you've seen those memes that are going around Facebook and social media with the songs, that's basically what we're doing. That's CPR for the amygdala, is you're saying, okay, hands, mind, calm down, give yourself a distraction. So what I'd like to do now, oh, I missed that one, okay. So this is a really quick video that shows the different delta wave states as we're hand havening. And so one of my colleagues down in Australia made this video, and this is actually measuring brainwaves. So this gets back to that conversation of how do we know this works? And lovely music here. So what we're looking at here is following this purple line specifically. He's measuring brain waves. And as we're hand havening, the delta wave goes up exponentially. So he's just doing this. Now he has a lot of history with hand havening, palm havening. And so his brain's very permissive with a lot of muscle memory for it, or what I call neural memory. His brain knows that when he starts doing this, he goes into delta. And when he stops, his brain drops out of delta. So this is the actual little band that he has on. It has little sensors inside. It just goes across the forehead like such. This is a technology that we're working on with havening. It's not quite perfected yet. Oh, never mind, that's not going to work. Sorry about that, everybody. It really wants to play the video. All right, so let's talk for a minute about what actually happens in a moment of a stressful experience. And so this is when a moment is stressful enough that our brain actually goes, I'm going to remember this forever. And I was on the phone with a patient yesterday who got a phone call that her daughter has coronavirus and her daughter's pregnant. And so in that moment, she said, my entire body felt like it went into a flash freeze state. And I couldn't move, and I just dropped the phone, and then I fell to the floor. So in that moment, her brain went into a hyper gamma wave state. And what that means is that threat stimulus of that information coming from her daughter went straight to her amygdala for assessment. And we have our senses over here. And so she heard the data and her brain went, okay, let's assess this data. And our thalamus, I call this little post office of our brain, the thalamus. And so that little brain part said, we're going to take this data up here to our thinking brain, but we're also going to send this data to our amygdala for assessment. Now, if the data had been, say her daughter calls and says, hey mom, I got the sonogram, it's a boy, her brain would have done this exact same process. The information would have gone to the thalamus, sent up to the cortex for assessment, sent to the amygdala for assessment, and then carried on through the information process. Because the data was threat data, the amygdala, in her case, came online, and what's called an AMPA receptor was potentiated. And that AMPA receptor is now encoded in her brain, and every time her phone dings or rings, her little brain, Amy back here, goes, oh no, there's going to be, it's another scary piece of data about my daughter. Oh no, somebody else has it. So her amygdala now is primed for any data related to her phone, because that was part of the encoding sensory piece, to say this is fear data. And if we can apply that to any type of fear stimulus, that this is when we talk about somebody who grew up in an alcoholic home can walk into a room and know who's been drinking or who's upset, if the alcoholic home had a rage, simply by seeing the quirk of an eyebrow on somebody's face. Because that quirk of an eyebrow, if it's in a very specific way, indicates danger. And so this little amygdala, this little receptor on the amygdala is hypersensitized now. And so this is what we're looking at in terms of the trauma reprocessing experience. So let me walk through this in another way. Data comes in through our 5 senses and is put into an assessment state with our amygdala, Amy, at that 75 millisecond state. And again, that, like I said, that data does come up to our thinking brain, but you'll notice here it says 35 milliseconds. What that means is that it takes almost 4 times longer than the amygdala for our thinking brain to come on board. So I'd like to invite everybody to blink. That's 350 milliseconds, an eye blink. So 4 times faster than that eye blink, our little fear brain is going, is this data scary or threatening to me? That's really fast, really, really, really fast. And if the amygdala starts to sense data that says, yeah, I think this is concerning, or if the data is immediately connected, so the ping of my patient's phone getting a text message now, her thinking brain has the volume turned down and her fear brain has the volume turned up. And so in a way, I like to think about this as though it's a percentage-based experience of, if the fear brain is on at 80%, our thinking brain is only available at 20%. The electrochemical opportunity or brainwave state shifts based on what part of our brain has greater power or decision-making capacity at that moment. And because survival trumps thinking, the amygdala will always win if there's a fear stimulus. She will always win. And our amygdala, when she encodes things, stops thinking about quality of life. She only cares about survival when she has an AMPA receptor encoded. So what does this actually look like in brainwave states? This is what's called a event-related potential here. And so in healthy individuals, when presented with an innocuous stimulus, so this, what was actually recorded here was a really basic sound, an auditory sound, like it sounds like this. Ah, ah. Now, unless you have PTSD, your brain's going to process that sound and say, okay, that's a novel piece of data. And so the amygdala is going to jump on board. And then our brain will pop that data up to another brainwave state that's what's called the go or no-go wave. And so if that part of our brain says, it's like, if people answer the phone, they go for Randy, it's go for prefrontal cortex. There's no threat. The brain can keep going forward. But if it's a no-go, it means that our information processing gets hijacked. And Amy's going to take control of the situation. The amygdala will take control of the situation. And our brain stops synthesizing data together. And that's why we can feel agitated and disrupted. Now you might say, well, what about people who have grown up with a traumatized brain, have developmental trauma, and actually do better in chaos? Their brain has created a new homeostatic state where only in chaos does the brain synthesize. And when it's not chaotic, it feels like this for them. So their natural homeostatic state has actually flipped. And so havening is supportive in the process of helping the brain get back to this. And for our patients who do have more severe developmental trauma, this is where we'll also invite in neurofeedback and have them do neurofeedback alongside their havening work, because it will help the brain build a new balance. So that gets back to the idea that havening is a bolt-on to everything that we're doing. But you can see if we have a traumatized brain and we're trying to get somebody to think their way into a felt sense of safety, well, if their brain lives like this, that's going to be awfully hard. So we want to do everything we can to get back into the early encoding states, that 75 millisecond state, to help that organically delink or become calmer, so that we can help the thinking brain, that 35 milliseconds, be more proactively online. Yeah, Jean, I think that's a good idea. We'll just send all the allowed slides. That's a good idea.
And this webinar is being recorded. And when
Yes.
it's completed, it will be posted to the Dr. Kate Truitt YouTube channel. And your wonderful moderators will be sending you a link to that.
Yeah.
So you'll be able to review it.
Yeah. It won't be public. It will just be available via the link. So this is your special experience. Or I believe that's what Carol had talked about with me. I'll double check on that. All right, and that being said, if you want to share it forward, I don't care. So feel free. What we're looking at then is when we're in the jagged brainwave state, our brain starts to live in hypoarousal, and then we'll often crash down into hypoarousal because our system cannot live outside in a hyper agitated state for long. That's what's called adrenal burnout eventually. And then we'll get this cycle of hypo and hyperarousal that we often see. That's the cycle of anxiety and depression, the circling of the window of tolerance with, if somebody has PTSD or complex PTSD, bouts of intense activation when our brain's put into a hyper gamma wave state. So a little important piece of information is that most people who have long-term depression have 6 or more traumatically encoded experiences. So their brain has moved into a chronic state of hypoarousal because of mitigating the vigilance and that their brain is creating for them all the time. It's just basically shut down. So havening we've come to find, been a really powerful adjunctive therapy for the treatment of depression, because we work on those early ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences, and as we clear out the amygdala, our patients with long-term depression get their brains back, and everything starts to balance out and normalize. Now, another way to look at this is if somebody's living in a state of hypervigilance or is having panic attacks, that means their amygdala is pinging, and every time it pings, more neural networks develop for additional fear stimuli. That's to the generalization, or also generalized anxiety. And so the more we clear out the amygdala, we are collapsing those acute encoded experiences as well as tied in events. And so we're able to navigate panic very, very quickly, and also move through generalized anxiety with much greater success, much more quickly and gently, because we're targeting the actual core encoding experiences and the part of the brain, the fear-based brain, that is causing this hyperarousal. So it really empowers the ability to work with the thinking brain in a different way. All right. So CPR for the amygdala. If you printed this out, go ahead and pull this up. This is a autonomic nervous system tool for in the moment regulation. This is for if somebody's been bumped outside that window and they're struggling to calm down, then the next thing that happens is going to make it even harder to calm down. And so it's that idea of you wake up in the morning and perhaps you didn't sleep that well, and so what we call getting up on the wrong side of the bed. And then you're going to make your coffee, and I've done this a million times. I'm going to pour my orange juice and I pour it on my cereal because my brain's not quite functional. Usually that happens on my training mornings when I'm up at 5 a.m. I'm not a morning person. And then if I didn't sleep well and I do that and I go, ah, and then perhaps I were to spill my coffee on my shirt, which happens quite, I'm a klutz. My middle name is Grace. And so it's just kind of inherent that I'm a klutz. I don't know why. And so now I've had 3 experiences where I'm getting bumped out of my window of tolerance, and I'm much more likely to be vulnerable to encoding a traumatic experience, or to keep getting bumped out until I'm hyper aroused, I'm agitated, I'm frustrated, and I'm not in a state of agency. So just think about if you've ever had a morning like that and what it feels like when we have those kinds of mornings, because it's human and it happens. And so CPR is your tool the first time you get bumped out to go, okay, I'm going to take a breath and with intention bring myself back into my window of tolerance. And rather than doing a 45-minute meditation, what this does is it can hack the system very quickly. And you can use your breath work and counting breaths as part of your CPR for even faster engagement. So what we're going to do with CPR for the amygdala, what the protocol is you notice where the data point of, I'm getting bumped out of my window of tolerance exists, or getting bumped out of my green zone exists. And some of us have a particular somatic data point that comes up. Mine tends to be a energy or a tightness in my chest when I start to get outside my zone. And so if I notice that energy come up, then organically now, because I've done this so much, I will actually start hand havening. And that's where I want everybody to trend towards, to build the neural memory so that your body has the core acknowledgement that if this data point shows up of anxiety or stress, your healing brain clicks in immediately and you start havening before you're even thinking about it. And that's actually where our team members are and our patients are. It's an awesome tell in therapy sessions with our patients, because we've done so much havening work and we request that they do these experiences as part of their homework on a daily basis, that we'll start tapping into something. And even our most avoidant patients will start to hand haven, and we go, oh, something's coming up, because they're organically regulating, utilizing the havening touch. So when we're doing CPR with intention, you're going to notice your data point of distress or disturbance, and then you're going to take a SUDS, that subjective unit of distress, which is a 0 to 10, and give it a rating. And I actually do recommend writing down your rating, and then apply the self-havening touch. to your face, arms, hands in any order. And if you have a sweet spot, my sweet spot is my arms. As you become more accustomed to the havening touch, feel free to just lean into your sweet spot, even though we know that the face and the cheeks are strongest to start. Your sweet spot will build the neural memory to make that the strongest. And that's what that hand havening showed in the video. That was Graham's sweet spot. Graham's the fellow who made the video. So for him, hand havening is actually a greater delta wave state than doing the face havening now, because he has neural memory for it. And then you're going to give your brain a different job. And what we're doing, and again, in the training, we go much more in depth into how this works neurologically. But what we're doing is saying, Amy, rather than ruminating and thinking about all the fear stories, or simply being focused in on the annoying, frustrating thing, we're going to intentionally use that 350 milliseconds in a different way and imagine we're doing something else. So if you have a breath work practice and you're used to counting breaths and doing triangle breathing or square breathing, that in of itself is a wonderful distraction. So simply applying the havening touch and counting your breaths while you breathe, doing your easy inhales and slow, gentle exhales. If you don't have a breathwork practice or you want to get more creative than that, you can see on the handout that we provided for you, we had these different 4 categories. And what we want to do for each category is find 20 counts per category. And so we're leaning into, as much as we can, giving our brain the opportunity to think about other sensory components. So I'd like to invite everybody for a moment to think about what it's like to go for a swim. If swimming's not a good thing for you, maybe bouncing a basketball. And just in your mind's eye, choose one of the two and see what happens as you imagine either swimming or bouncing a basketball. Did it kind of feel like you were actually doing it? So that's muscle memory combined with neural memory. And eventually, the more you haven, you'll be able to think about havening, and your brain will go into a delta wave state. So I work with, like I mentioned, performance horseback riders who are on these sometimes very what we call hot horses. So these are extremely expensive, extremely high sports performance horses. I say expensive because it blows my mind how much people will pay for these horses. God bless them. My little free thoroughbred off the track. But they have these reins in their hands. They have perhaps a crop. They have all these tools, and they're not going to be able to, before they go into a ring to do the round, put everything down and haven. But what we do is we train their brain into a protocol of imaginal havening so that they can use their tools. Now that's also, did I just freeze? Okay, there we go. That's also a hack that, I have an executive that uses that. I have an executive who actually does the opposite. And when he starts to get frustrated in meetings, will proactively do this to let his team know that he's getting frustrated. Because they all know now that havening is a tool, because we did a seminar for one of his board groups and they brought it forward to HR. So we can start to use havening through the imaginal ability and hack our system when we feel anxious without anybody even know that we're proactively regulating our system. So it's again, a really cool brain hack, and it's a ninja trick. So, but when we're learning CPR, what we want to be doing is finding 3 different distractions and check in on our SUDS again, and then we'll do another round of distractions and then check in on our SUDS again. So I'd like to do a self-havening demonstration to give everybody a sense of what this looks like and feels like. And I'm actually going to leave it on this page. And so first, let's just take another gentle breath in. And a long, slow, easy exhale. And if you're not used to doing breath work, as a rule, always try to allow your exhales to be a little longer than your inhales. There's some reasons behind that. We're just releasing more of the toxins, the CO2, as we're bringing in the healthy O2. Now, take a moment and allow your mind to drift back across the day. We're not going to start havening yet. I just kind of fooled you. Um, and I'd like for you to check in and see if you can find an experience that's causing a little disturbance or distress. Nothing greater than a 5, and it really might simply be your ambient energy right now, because we are living in a very unique time. For me, I've definitely noticed that when my phone lights up, my energy goes up. So I could definitely resonate with my patient. And every time a text message comes in, and my mom's also been in the hospital for several weeks, not with coronavirus. So my system's attuned to a text message coming in and having some anxiety tied to that. So just notice a stimulus that your brain or body goes, uh-oh, when it happens. And as you tune into that, take a moment and somewhere write down on that scale of 0 to 10, your interaction or your brain or your body's relationship with that stimulus. Where would you rank that? All right. Thank you, Rebecca. Now, I'd like to invite you to begin to apply the self-havening touch, hands and arms, in any order. And let's find an activity. So just any activity in your own life or throughout the course of your life that's neutral or positive. It could be bouncing a basketball, going for a swim in a pool, maybe playing tennis, kicking a soccer ball, any activity at all. And I'd like to invite you to engage in that activity 20 times and just count out loud or in your mind 20 times as you do that activity. So each basketball bounce might be 1, 2, 3. Just going for a swim, 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 20. I'm going to be quietly havening along as you complete that task. Once you're done, another gentle breath in. Now, I'd like for you to bring into your mind a space in the world that feels comforting and soothing to you. It may be real or imagined, perhaps a beach or a field. For me, it's always the barn with my horse. And allow your visual space to scan the environment and list 2 things that you see in your special space. And 2 colors. And see if you can find 2 things that you can hear. Maybe the gentle lapping of the waves, wind in the trees. And how about 2 things you can feel? Wind on your skin, the warmth of the sun. And 2 things that you can smell. And notice if your special space has a color or an energy. Notice if it has a vibrance or a home in your mind or your body. Place that provides information for you of connection and engagement. Take a gentle breath into that color or that energy. And I'd like to invite you to count by twos up to 20. And then let's count backwards from 50 by fives. And when you're ready, inviting in another gentle inhalation, gentle breath in, and slow, relaxed exhale. Let's take a moment and check back in on that experience that you started with, inviting it to be the front and center of your attention. And notice, has it shifted or changed? And again, taking a moment to rank it on that scale of 0 to 10. Where would you rank it now? And again, if it shifted for you, perhaps another smiley face or just say, yep, in the chat box. Just let us know if it's changed. Rebecca, did yours shift? 0 now, yeah. Yeah, mine did too, thank you. So it's so simple. And this is, okay, so I get choked up again. This is the profound power of this. And teach this to every human that you know, right? Especially right now, but in general. Because this is something that is so easily done, and we can take care of our brain and our body in such a powerful, easy way. And we are all biologically hardwired to be able to do this. So, and the one caveat again is that the CPR for the amygdala specifically is not about sourcing traumatic experiences. And when we get into the 2-day training, we explore that in depth, and there's a lot of nuance to it. This is really about empowering yourself to be in relationship with your brain and your body, and to wrap that warm fuzzy blanket around Amy and let her know that we're okay. So the next piece that I want to focus in and use the rest of our time on is, once we've calmed down, let's harness the opportunity of resilience that havening gives, to move into resilience that havening gives us. Let's empower neuroplasticity. Because again, even especially right now, if I didn't have my own phoenix, and I didn't know that my brain is capable of phoenixing up, I don't know how I would be going through these experiences. And even for my patients to know that they have these tools is so important. And I've had my own moment, even last night, we're in a state of trying to decide if we had my mom go back to the hospital because she released home and she has an infection. And we don't know if it's safe for her to go to the hospital. She's over at Eisenhower Medical Center, which was where the first Riverside County, as I'm sure all of you know, being out in Riverside, patient was hospitalized for the coronavirus. And so the nursing staff is really tapped out. So we're trying to balance, what are we going to do? And I was able to do a lot of havening last night and move into a state of, I feel like I have my angels on my shoulder, my late fiance being one of them, and bringing in that capacity of saying, whatever needs to happen will happen. And we're going to be able to make the right choices. even if I don't know what those choices are right now. And that's resiliency, that's agency. And Amy has to get out of the way for us to be able to move into that state, because she just thinks about fear stories and worst case scenarios, because that's her message to keep us safe. And going back to the idea of a cough being indicative of death, right now, empowering ourselves and everybody we know to help Amy get out of the way. And so we can go, Amy, no, having a cough doesn't mean you're going to die. Having a cough means you have a cough. Let's calm down and look at what are our steps for health right now. Because one of the things we know is inflammation weakens our immune system, and Amy generates inflammation. So the more we can empower ourselves to stay calm and grounded and have agency, the healthier our brain and our body are going to be. So our goal is to keep thriving as much as possible right now. And the core of resiliency is self. And if we think about our thinking brain is self. It's our ability to have choice and decision making. And so remember, Amy, the amygdala hijacks us out of self. So we need to get ourselves back into a state of agency, especially right now, back into the window of tolerance or a green zone state to be able to make functional change. And so the more we stay in that state and build intentional neural networks, the more we keep checking in on the smile, or I'm going to teach you another exercise here in a moment, the more we're building healthy neural networks for resiliency and agency. And so I'm going to teach you a hack right now. Then again, if you come to the training, you'll learn a lot more hacks. What we want to do is make sure that our brain and our body have the ability to stay strong, so that we can turn into this really empowered 100% state. Now, if we're at a -10, this is our SUDS, we want to do CPR. If we're at a -3, we want to do CPR first. We want to help the brain calm down and then move into resiliency development. Because if Amy's too hypervigilant, she can actually take things that would otherwise be positive and turn them negative with her fear stories. So if we're too reactive, our brain will still find the difficult things in any situation. So an example of that would be a scenario of a patient who had a safe place of going swimming, and we'd in a specific pool, and she had created that as her safe space, or her calm space while we were doing EMDR. But then one day she was really hyper aroused, and all of a sudden she tried to go to her calm space, and it was a turbulent, storming sea. And we had to eventually, when I learned havening, do havening on the sea to get her calm place back, because Amy had hijacked it. So we want to be really careful and to talk to people about CPR first always. If we're hyper aroused, take that time to just be intentional about calming down and then moving into creating healthy neural networks. So when we're creating the healthy neural networks, our goal then is to step into what feeling state do I want to have right now in this moment? What do I need more of? And to focus in on a time where we felt that way. And even if you don't have an emotional experience of that specifically, you can tap into an emotional experience, a felt physical experience. So if it's strength, you want strength, and you've gone to the gym and you've worked out, and you know what it feels like to feel physically strong doing a dumbbell, like imagining I'm doing right now. Your brain can hack that feeling of strength at the gym and carry that into the emotional state, and then start asking the question, what if I was? What if I was strong? What if I was strong? What if I was strong? And so apologies again for the lag, as I'm sure you guys are witnessing in your own lives. The internet has never been taxed as it's been taxed today. As we go from the what if I was, then we can move into I can be, I will be, I deserve to be. And we're inviting in each possibility and including the self-havening touch within it. So what if I was strong? Right now, one of my core mantras has been for a long time, because I do have chronic health considerations, is what if I was healthy and strong? And my brain and my body now have a neural network for what that feels like when I'm in a healthy and strong state. And so I invite that in almost every day. And then if I feel like I am healthy and strong, then I move into I can be, or I am, if it's 100% true. So once we've calmed ourselves down, we want to move into the creating possibilities space. And on our YouTube channels, we have a bunch of different videos, guided meditations. You also received a printout of the color of breath meditation here. And I have a guided one of these on the YouTube video. This is one that I want you to also feel comfortable as you're teaching your clients or family members to do CPR for the amygdala. This is a great resiliency building meditation. So feel free to start using this with your clients as you're teaching them self-havening. It really moves into this what if I was experience. And I don't know if I can go over it all. I'm happy to go over a little bit if people are open to that. You can also just jump off, but if people want to stay past the last bit of time, I'm happy to do a color of breath guide before we formally end the meeting. So I want to wrap up and make sure we get the rest of the information. Rebecca, did you have a hand?
Yes, I just was as regarding people leaving, if you can send a chat with your name saying leaving, that will serve as your sign out for today. So please do that to the chat box before you leave.
So really quick, I just want to touch on the upcoming training, and then we can do the color of breath meditation. We're doing something unique for the training. We've moved it completely virtual. It will take place over 2 weekends, April 25th and 26th, as well as May 2nd and 3rd. And we're very brain health conscious around here. So we don't want people in front of their screens for 8 hours straight. It's not good for your brains. And by the way, if you don't have blue light glasses during this time, get blue light glasses. They're extremely helpful for helping the brain stay in a state of healthy engagement, especially as we're doing telehealth. The training will be 4 hours, 8:30 to 12:30 each day. And the break in between times will give you an opportunity to take the tools that you're learning back into session with your patients and integrate them, and then come back the next weekend to learn the second set of protocols. If you sign up and register for this training, you are automatically grandfathered into our next live training. My goal right now is I want people doing the work. So I want to empower you to be able to sit with your patients. And so it's basically in a way a free training that we're doing right now, but we have to pay for all the tech up front. So that you can start doing this through telehealth and bringing it forward to your patients and feel really confident in your ability to do that. So if you want to join us for the 2-day, please do. We'd love to have all of you there, and we'll have breakout groups. I have people who are literally going to be joining us from all over the world, practitioners and other trainers to facilitate the breakout groups. So it's going to be pretty phenomenal. And then when we are back in human form and rooms together, you're grandfathered in. So it's a 2-for-1 deal. So you'll get to have the experience of then doing the actual facilitated training with us in person. The information, or Rebecca, do you mind actually dropping the website in, and then we can also send forward the information through the emails as well. It's vivaexcellence.com to register. All right. So if you need to pop off, please absolutely do. Our YouTube channel, and Rebecca, if you'd put that in the chat box too, Dr. Kate Truitt. It has meditations, all sorts of different informative things. We have an entire telecommuting series that we're doing now, and it has our entire team on it. So, and we update that several times a week. So if you have to pop off and miss our color of breath meditation, that's okay. You can find it on our YouTube channel. All right, so if you are able to stay with us, I'd like to once again invite you to ground yourself. Notice your feet planted on the floor. Notice the earth holding you up. Bringing in a nice gentle breath once again. I'd like to invite you to passively Pay attention to the state of your body right now. Do not try to change anything. Simply notice how your body and your mind feel. Invite your body to gently begin to relax. Your shoulders dropping a little lower. Your jaw loosening so your teeth are not touching. Your eyelids starting to feel heavy. Take a deep breath in. Hold it. And slowly, gently breathe out. I invite you now to gently begin to apply the self-havening touch. Hands, arms, and face in any order. As you continue self-havening, once again, notice your breath. Notice how your body knows how much air you need. Notice with interest how your breath goes in and out. Feel the pause after each inhalation. And the pause before drawing another breath once you've released and exhaled. Allow your body to relax and your mind to focus on the soothing, self-havening touch. And ask yourself, what energy would you like to welcome into your day as you move forward from this moment? Invite your mind to ponder the possibilities of being curious and inquisitive, or perhaps energized and present. Take a moment to notice a state of being you would like more of in this moment. As you continue self-havening, ask yourself, what if I was? Quietly completing the question with your chosen state. I invite you to quietly ponder again, what if I was? What if your chosen energetic state had a color? I invite your mind to explore this possibility. What color would it be? Is this a color that you've seen in nature, on your life's journeys? And invite yourself to be present with this possibility of this color, of your energetic state. And once again, query, what if I was? Continue to gently apply the self-havening touch and notice the expansive opportunities of your chosen state and its beautifully colored self. Invite in this color as you gently inhale, allowing the color to be expansive with your breath, expanding in your chest, expanding throughout your body, and slowly releasing your breath. Again, questioning, what if I was? And noticing your expansive, beautifully colored state and asking yourself, I can be, or I deserve to be, or if this color has moved into a state of affirmation, I am. Again, filling in the blank with your chosen energetic state. Invite this state to move with you throughout your day, inviting this color to be a part of each moment if you choose for it to be, or to be waiting next to you with your smile. And when you're ready, I invite you again to take a gentle breath in, a slow, easy exhale, and return yourself to this moment, noticing the opportunity to move forward into your day with this energy. Now, I know everybody's been able to ask questions as we've moved through the experience, and I just want to thank you so deeply for having us this morning. And I hope to see you all at the training, at this one or at a future one. And regardless, I really hope and pray that you bring these tools forward into your life, share them with your loved ones, with your clients, and thank you. Is there anything else that, I know we'll take a moment here to let everybody sign off.
Thank you.
So we're just going to hang out until everybody's off and able to let us know that they've completed their attendance as their signature. And if there's any final questions that you'd like to pop in, because we're going to be hanging out for a minute, please feel free to send them over.
I see your nose, Carol, or your note, Carol. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. I don't know if Lynn's already left, but if the client is havening touch averse, you can also haven a stuffed animal.
That's a good one.
And the mirror neurons. So I have a number of clients who have little stuffed animals that are their havening, you know, havening teddy bear, or and they'll haven the animal.
Kate also seeing a question about if someone is a student, are they still able to come to the havening training?
Yes, just make sure your supervisor signs off on it if they give you approval. That's the main thing. We want to make sure you're within your supervisor's scope of practice, as always.
And also, once you're licensed, come on over.
Once you're licensed, yes.
That's how I started. I started by being Dr. Truitt's facilitator back before I was licensed as an MFT, and started learning. And then once I became licensed, I came through and completed all my certification.
And so after 5 years of courting Rebecca, she joined the team.
I'm hard to get. What can I say? Okay.
All right. Let's see.
Okay, 26 people. Still gonna sign out.
I wonder if we can.
I took a screenshot of all the participants.
Oh, perfect.
Okay. And then we'll be able to, hopefully be able to cross-reference that.
Yeah, great. Great. We can even just take a screenshot of the final ones too, if we want to.
Okay. And also a screenshot of their names, not of videos or anything.
Yes.
Not violating anyone's privacy. For those who are asking, again, questions about licensing and participating in the training, if you are pre-licensed, your supervisor has to sign off on approval for use of these skills and techniques or be trained in them for supervising you. Otherwise, you can complete your licensure and utilize them with your patients.
I'm happy to have a conversation with any supervisors. You know, and we can do package deals even. So I've had a couple of students who wanted to come, and supervisor didn't know anything about it, and so we did a package deal so everybody could come. And really, I just want people to, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, we only have names, Paul.
Yeah. I'm not that technologically savvy to log into anybody's webcams or anything. I can barely do Zoom.
Zoom's also HIPAA compliant by bill. So
yes. Carol's volunteering to supervise her staff after completing her training.
Oh, fabulous!
Beautiful. Catherine Ferrari's interested in that with an associate and her potentially attending a training. Great.
Perfect. Yeah. Here's see. So I'm going to give everybody my office manager's email, and if you want to reach out to her and let her know how many people you're interested in a package for, mention that you came to this lecture, and she'll connect with me and we'll put together packages. So we can just do it on a case-by-case basis if need be.
Kate, would you like to address the question about utilizing these techniques before being certified, which are safe to use?
Oh, yes, yes.
Great question.
Yeah, so you can absolutely use the techniques before you're certified. You will be walking out of the training able and trained to use the tools. Mm-hmm. Even in between the 2 weekends, you'll start. I want everybody who's attending the training to start practicing them. When you're certified, what that means is you can start advertising, you can start marketing yourself as a certified havening practitioner. Mm-hmm. And you'll have obviously a more in-depth ability and knowledge with the tools because you'll be off your training wheels by the time you're certified. But the goal is to start practicing because it's hard to get really good at something if we don't practice. And the certification program is 5 90-minute consultation groups specific to the people who attend the training, who attend the online training, and then case studies and one-on-one guidance with case studies and videos. But you'll get 5 90-minute follow-up certification groups that are led by the Viva Excellence team.
And Kate, would you say that before certification is CPR for the amygdala and creating possibilities? Those are good things for people to be able to utilize for themselves, and can they share them with their patients before being certified?
Well, not before going to the training, yes. Once they go to the training, they'll be able to use all the protocols.
All of them. But what we looked at today, people can utilize that?
They can use that today.
Yep.
Do it today. Yes, please. Do it yesterday.